When he gained access to an Iowa radio station, his testimonials reached millions. Owner of radio station KTNT was Norman Baker, who also provided Hoxsey with a large clinic. Baker was a catalog salesman and former stage hypnotist of unsavory reputation. Hoxsey's provocative broadcasts to bust the medical trust soon drew 300 patients a day. Among them was his most fantastic case. The top of Mandus Johnson's skull was rotting flesh, and rumors circulated that he had already died. But in front of 32,000 spectators, Hoxsey performed the resurrection of Mandus Johnson. Hoxsey and a doctor removed the now dead tumor that composed the top of Johnson's skull. Johnson would live on for 30 years and credit Hoxsey with his miraculous cure. Even this spectacle of publicity did not get Hoxsey an investigation. Instead, it drew an angry blast from Dr. Fishbein in the Journal. The next night, gunfire sprayed KTNT during Hoxsey's broadcast. He charged Dr. Fishbein with ordering his destruction, but again he had no proof. Soon their battle would reach federal levels. When Hoxsey approached the National Cancer Institute for an investigation, the agency refused. The NCI said his medical records were incomplete. Hoxsey said doctors refused to supply necessary records because of Dr. Fishbein's influence. The government concluded it would be a waste of public funds to investigate. Having struck oil in Texas, Hoxsey offered to pay for a test himself. His challenges were putting Dr. Fishbein under public pressure, and the doctor fought back hard in the public arena. But when he wrote blood money for the Hearst Sunday papers, he went too far.
Fishbein said, like a ghoul feasting on the bodies of the dead and the dying. And that is why Mr. Hoxsey sued Dr. Fishbein.
Hoxsey sued Dr. Fishbein and the Hearst newspaper empire for libel and slander. He didn't seem to stand a chance. The nation's most notorious quack faced a who's who of American medicine. Surprisingly, Harry Hoxsey became the first man ever to win a judgment against Dr. Fishbein and the AMA.
And how did he win? He brought in, day after day, he brought in patients who said, my doctor told me that I had cancer and I was going to die within an X number of days, and I came down here. Dr. Hoxsey cured me. Here I am. That was 2 years ago, or 3 years. Patient after patient that came and made this testimony. It was very impressive.
The Hearst Fishbein defense tried to exclude the testimony of Hoxsey's allegedly cured patients.
The individual endorsement, if you will, patient endorsement, is really not the best way to evaluate a medical treatment or a medical procedure because too oftentimes these individuals are not knowledgeable enough in even their own health or what has transpired to realize that they're not the ones to make the best assessment of this.
The credibility of Hoxsey's patients was on trial, but so were the credentials of Dr. Morris Fishbein, who made astonishing admissions. Dr. Fishbein failed anatomy in medical school. He went to work at the Journal before completing his internship. In fact, he never treated a patient or practiced a day of medicine in his entire career. The leader of medicine's quack attack was increasingly on the defensive. Critics charged the AMA with being a doctors' union setting medical policy in its own interests. 2 federal courts agreed it was a monopoly. Dr. Fishbein had to resign from his post at the AMA. But the Hoxsey-Fishbein trials held an even more shocking revelation. Dr. Fishbein admitted in court that Hoxsey's supposedly brutal pastes actually did cure external cancers.
There was a man up in the University of Wisconsin who did some experimental work on skin cancer with this material, using very minute amounts of it and using it several times very carefully. And he reported on it, and it was reported in our journal that it did have merit.
Mildred Nelson uses 2 forms of Hoxsey external medicines, a yellow powder and a red paste. They are an old kind of folk medicine called escharotics.
This is the yellow powder that we used. It's selective for malignant tissue only. It will not bother the other. Only the malignant part dies. And then it separates itself from the normal tissue by an accumulation of white cells underneath, and this pushes it off.
The red paste is not selective. It is used to dissolve large tumors.
This is the true escharotic.
Your escharotic is something that burns. Actually, it is a burning product that will, in one sense of the word, eat or destroy the skin, or wherever. You put it on an area, and that area will come out. Almost as though you had taken a knife and cut it out or scooped it out.
The red paste contains bloodroot. Bloodroot is an herb whose use goes back centuries.
Here's the bloodroot, one that Hoxsey was using for external treatment of cancer. It's a common wildflower here in the eastern deciduous forest. The Indians did use this for external cancerous conditions, and this was picked up early by the traveling doctors of European descent. And this, with zinc oxide and several other herbs, plus or minus, showed up in many different formulas for external cancers. So many formulas, in fact, that one would suspect it must have some positive effect. Sanguinarine, by the way, is another of the alkaloids that did show some anti-tumor activity in the NCI experimental studies.
The pharmaceutical industry spends millions marketing their drugs to doctors. And study after study has shown that most doctors get their information on drugs from company sales reps, the so-called detail men. Product promotion may include everything from free samples and office supplies to 4-star dinners and educational grants to medical societies.
The investment in marketing is tremendous. They hire 40,000 sales representatives, each of whom has a new car, a laptop computer, and an expense account to get the word out about their medications. Why couldn't those sales reps keep these drugs from being misused? That's the big question I ask the pharmaceutical industry. If you can bring in the marketing expertise that knows how to change behavior, and they're famous for it. I mean, they're proud of the fact that they're the best sales group of all the salespeople in the country because they can modify behavior. Why didn't they keep these problems from happening?
Like all industries, pharmaceutical manufacturers are interested in broadening their market. And they know that once a drug is approved, doctors can prescribe it any way they see fit. It's a common practice called off-label use, something regulators can't control.
I got great news. They're going ahead with the drug. What? Lots of things in the lab to do, lots of things to do.
But Chris, you said there was much more testing to do.
Well, people say things. Fascinating.
Chris, isn't it a little early in the research phase to be releasing a new drug?
Well, Simon, we can't be too by the bookie about this testing thing. It's better. Besides, Baxter here said the drug worked, and we all trust Baxter, don't we? It's just that, Alice, are you saying that you don't trust Baxter?
No,
Chris?
What gives?
Yeah.
They were going to close down our lab and we didn't come up with a drug.
Oh.
Come on! We might be releasing the most effective antidepressant ever.
well, it is a good drug.
Yeah, but...
Yeah! Come on, let's celebrate.
There have been some notorious cases across the world, including America, for example, where it has been clear that companies have maliciously edited files, excluded essential data, failed to report serious adverse reactions, and generally misled regulatory agencies. It's innocent to the extent that the companies have been dealing with these drugs for years. They develop them, they like them, they love them, they're their babies. and they really can't see anything wrong in the drug.
And drug companies aren't the only ones who don't like bad news. In North America, the same regulators that approve a drug are the ones who must also act to withdraw it if it's causing harm. And once a drug is off the market, there's no mechanism to investigate what went wrong.
We know more about medicines today when they go on the market than we've ever known before. Then why are we taking drugs off the market? Somebody should ask that question, and the people asking that question shouldn't have a dog in that fight. If an airplane falls, we don't ask the airliner, was their design wrong? We don't even ask the FAA, the Federal Aviation Authority, did they have the wrong standards? We have a National Transportation and Safety Board that's independent of the two, and they can come in and say the airline was wrong, or they can say the standards were wrong. It's an independent look, which has been missing in the drug development arena.
Billions of dollars are spent on research getting drugs to market. Only a fraction of that is currently spent on post-marketing surveillance. That fact, combined with the speed up in drug approvals, has a lot of safety experts very worried.
No. Did Marv talk to you?
Yes, he did.
Ah, good. So you know.
Know what?
That we're applying for your drug to be non-prescription.
But my drug is for the clinically depressed.
You know, Chris, you've invented a marvelous drug, and right now only certain people can have access to it, and we think that everyone should have access to it, like ghetto children. You know, apparently their lives are horrible. Did you read that thing in the Times? Anyway, you want ghetto children to be happy, don't you, Chris?
Well, sure, Don, but...
Right, of course you do. Now, look, there may be some papers to sign, that's if this thing happens, but of course it might not happen. You know how these things are.
But I really think that...
It was supposed to be fixed. Come on, Chris.
To many outsiders, Vanessa's story looks like an isolated tragedy. Others see it as evidence of a drug safety system in crisis. One that's withdrawing drugs too slowly and getting them onto the market far too fast.
It's just one of 7 major new drugs, okayed since 1993, that have now been withdrawn.
When Seldane is taken along with a drug that blocks its metabolism, it can kill.
Dexfenfluramine, better known as Redux, have disappeared.
Pulled after 3 years on the market, the diabetes drug Resolute.
Besides Propulsid, there's Lotrinex for irritable bowel syndrome, Regulin for diabetes, Durac, painkiller.
In recent years, we've seen rather more withdrawals from the market of relatively new drugs, which clearly should not have been approved, than we did in the past. And I think that bears evidence, is evidence of the fact that the work is being handled too quickly and without sufficient opportunity to check the credibility of the evidence.
Over the last 40 years, Dr. Graham Dukes has worked inside the pharmaceutical industry and as a drug regulator in Europe. He's seen what can happen when a weak regulatory system makes a fatal mistake. In the late 1950s and early 60s, a drug is given to thousands of pregnant women. The ensuing disaster will mark a watershed in drug regulation.
When we had the thalidomide disaster, when children were born without arms and legs because of this sleeping remedy that was destroying the unborn child, people reacted by either introducing new drug laws or tightening up the drug laws. I'm afraid that since we haven't had any really major dramas in the last few years, a lot of smaller ones, people have become lax. They've begun to believe the stories that the industry puts around, that it is such a valuable and worthy partner of the regulatory process. And
over the past decade, we have been gaining ground. And when I say we, I mean ordinary people committed to the welfare of all of humanity, all people irrespective of gender and class and race and religion, all species on the planet. We managed to take the biggest government and one of the largest chemical companies to court on the case of Neem and win a case against them. W.R. Grace and the U.S. government's patent on Neem was revoked by a case we brought along with the Greens of Europe in Parliament and the International Organic Agriculture Movement. We won because we worked together. We have overturned nearly 99% of the basmati patent of rice tech. Again, because we worked as a worldwide coalition. Old women in Texas, scientists in India, activists sitting in Vancouver, a little basmati action group. We stopped the third world being viewed as the pirate, and we showed the corporations were the pirate. Look how little it took for Gandhi to work against the salt laws of the British, where the British decided the way they would make their armies and police forces bigger is just tax the salt. And all that Gandhi did was walk to the beach, pick up the salt, and say, nature gives it for free, we need it, we've always made it, we will violate your laws, we will continue to make salt. We've had a similar commitment for the last decade in India that any law that makes it illegal to save seed is a law not worth following. We will violate it because saving seed is a duty to the earth and to future generations. We thought it would really be symbolic. It is more than symbolic. It is becoming a survival option. Farmers who grow their own seeds, save their own seeds, don't buy pesticides, have threefold more incomes than farmers who are locked into the chemical treadmill, depending on Monsanto and Cargill. We have managed to create alternatives that work for people.
Well, I hope you've been enjoying the show. I have so much material on this. Looks like there's going to have to be a part 2 where I address the excuses that some of these drug companies have for creating patent cannabis medicines and patented strains of cannabis. And I'm writing an article about this issue with Dr. Lester Grinspoon, who's written Marijuana, the Forbidden Medicine, along with James Bacalar, and he was also the famous author of Marijuana Reconsidered. Yes, you should check out Dr. Lester Grinspoon. He and I and many others in the cannabis community are concerned about the patenting of cannabis medicines and where that will lead. As well, you saw in that last interview Vandana Shiva, who overturned the patent on neem with her fellow activist, and she's an author of this book, amongst many others, Biopiracy, The Plunder of Nature and Knowledge. So definitely check her out. She's all over the internet and in the movie The Corporation. And, well, yes, we snuck in some clips from the movie Brain Candy there off the internet. And I used for some of the background music Switch on Bach 2000 by Wendy Carlos. So if you like electronic music, definitely check her out. And until part 2 of this issue on cannabis patents, whenever me and Dr. Grinspoon get that published, and we provide you a link for that, or if we don't get it published, we'll just turn it into a Pot TV show, and you'll see it here on Pot TV. Stay tuned for that. But until then, my name has been David Mamalevine, and you have been watching High Society on Pot TV. High as you get off the net. One click, and you're hooked.